All right, so before we get to our speakers for today, and now that we're about halfway through our collaboration together, we wanted to orient ourselves around the intention of this work and talk a little bit about the context as well. So we recognize that in order to create an inclusive vision for the neighborhood spaces south of 8th, that we need to also focus on community collaboration and building relationships. And we hope that you all have felt that energy through the tactical committee and that intention. And in this neighborhood development urban design plan, it's just really critical to make sure those connections are intact. However, with traditional aspects of urban design and neighborhood development, those initiatives have not always resulted in inclusive and affordable places. And in traditional practices, in a lot of cases, they don't always reflect the culture and identity and local community context well either, or build off of existing community assets and goals. So through this process, we are working to co-create the space with you all and the broader community through our open events to share ideas, learnings, and collaborate together, as well as identify ways we can build some of these partnerships to actualize the vision that we will be creating together. And I think it's just really important to recognize and acknowledge that if we don't work with some of these influential institutions and entities in the area, then we can miss opportunities to collaborate and help, again, make some of the goals of this visioning work possible. So as we were creating the framework for engagement for this process, we took into consideration ways we could help empower community members by teaching you all some of these traditional aspects of neighborhood development while making room to cover topics that are specifically critical to the community spaces south of 8th. And so here's a snapshot of some of the topics we've covered and what we plan to cover moving forward. Next slide, please. And really working as a collective to make this an iterative process, because we want to leave room for the process to inform the process and how we're collaborating together and recognizing these different dynamics and how they play into the specific areas that we're looking at through south of 8th. And so to kind of just highlight some of those different dynamics that we've been discussing this whole time, next slide. Here are some of the dynamics that we wanted to highlight. So for one, a very active community of residents and community members, and not only south of 8th, but in Northeast OKC as a whole. Then we also have the dynamic of Okura-owned land, which is there in the navy blue again, this map that we've seen over and over again, and how this work will have the most influence over those properties in the navy blue. And as well as a dynamic of multiple private property owners who own the majority of properties south of 8th in these other colors that you see here on your screen. And then we also have the dynamic of neighboring institutions that have resources and programs that can be further connected to this community. So to be sensitive and inclusive to all of these dynamics at play and be thoughtful about it, we are engaging with you all in the broader community, but also through engagement activities and meetings to help keep community members informed and their voices centered and included throughout this process. And so here's how we've done some of that outside of the committee sessions that we're having with you all bi-weekly. So we've attended the Northeast OKC Neighborhood Coalition meetings, led by one of our very own community members, Ms. Denevita Davis, to inform neighborhood leaders to know about this project, be plugged in, and so they can also share with their neighbors and their neighborhood associations. We have also met with the Harrison Walnut Neighborhood Association as well, led by community members, Pastor Price and Ms. Vera Ford, to present to their neighbors and give copies of presentations and the content that we're covering in these meetings, and also hear their ideas and concerns. And we've also been meeting with other private property owners in the area. There are multiple, as you all saw in that map. And we have connected with a few of them to identify opportunities where alignment can exist through the vision efforts through south of 8th and what their plans might be. And so as we transition into the visioning phase of the project, we're going to talk more about some of those opportunities and see how that can all fit in and connect to visioning through south of 8th. And although we have promoted this project in multiple ways, including knocking on doors, flyers, mailing out postcards, social media marketing, TV media interviews, and more, and we will continue those marketing efforts, it will really take our collective voices to let people know about this project, especially considering that we will have open events happening this spring. So please share again information with your networks and follow us on social media so we can ensure that our neighbors and our community members are alert and aware and don't miss an opportunity for their voices to be heard throughout this process. Next slide, please. So just a quick check-in with our timeline here. We will have one more session in the reflection and engagement phase of the project. Thank you all so much. I know we've been doing a lot of learning, a lot of listening. And so we appreciate you all jumping in and learning and being present. And we are really excited to, after our next session, which will be over design aesthetics, be moving into visioning, where we will have what Deborah mentioned, activities and discussion. And Ms. Davis, thank you for your idea to make sure we include this topic of density, which we absolutely plan to do, to really get deep into what can these future areas look like and ideate around how that can best serve the community on the properties south of 8th that Okura owns. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, we're moving along with the schedule. Okay. And just a few housekeeping. Can we go to the next slide, please? I think there was another housekeeping slide. Maybe it was after agenda. Let's see. No, okay, go. We can go back. Just a few housekeeping things before I go into the agenda. So if you haven't already, please send in your bios and headshots. If you don't have a headshot, that's okay. Just send in a short bio. We requested these at the first session, so we're running a little bit behind on this. So it's okay if you haven't sent it in yet. Just if you can, please send that in today. We just need a short bio, a paragraph, if not shorter, about you. We don't need the whole resume. It's okay. And just a headshot if you have one, or a preferred picture if you have one to send to us, please, so we can highlight you as a member of this project. And also in the first session, and I know we haven't been able to meet in person too often throughout this process, but we gave you all a form to sign to join the committee. So if you're able to scan that in, or we can come pick it up from you, let us know, because we do need those forms from you as soon as we can get that, please. And then last, but definitely not least, again, please follow on social media. It helps the visibility of this project. It helps spread the word. It helps make sure that people are aware and can participate. So if you like, follow on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're just south of 8th on everything. If you search it, it will pop up and you'll be able to plug it in with us on social media. All right, so getting into our agenda for today. So we're going to hear some wonderful presentations from, again, institutions, neighboring institutions here in the area. That includes OU Health Sciences Center, the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority, and the Innovation District, to hear about their programs, resources, and possibly get into some conversation about partnership opportunities with these entities that can help support inclusivity in this neighborhood and support the efforts of south of 8th. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speakers, which are Dr. Valerie Williams and Paul Manzeli with OU Health Sciences Center. Thank you both so much for joining us today. I'm going to turn over the Zoom stage to you all, and we welcome you and thank you for being with us.
Well, good morning. Good morning, Vanessa. Good morning, Deborah and everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm joined by my colleague, Paul Manzeli. Maybe we could start by introducing ourselves so you know a little bit about us. And then we can, we're going to split up the time to talk a little bit about what the Health Sciences Center does. So I'm Valerie Williams. I'm the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and Faculty Development at the Health Sciences Center. I live in Northeast Oklahoma City, up near 50th and Kelly. Moved here about a little bit more than 30 years ago to become Associate Dean and a faculty member in the College of Medicine. And since that time, I've been promoted at the university. Grew up in New York City and on a farm in Arkansas. So I've lived a rural life as well as the urban life, and find Oklahoma City to be sort of the perfect balance between the two. Let me turn it over to Paul to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Manzeli. I'm a Senior Associate Vice President of Administration and Finance for the OU Health Sciences Center. You hear me okay, Vanessa?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm originally from Boston, but I've been in Oklahoma for 40 plus years. I've worked on the OU Health Science Center campus for 25 plus years. My background is in finance and business. And I've been working with the university for the past 15 years or so, with to some extent with capital projects and properties, which is why I'm here today with Dr. Williams, because I know the lay of the land in terms of the campus and the various entities and the buildings and some of our plans. And so I'll certainly speak to that as we're giving our presentation. That's why I'm here, and appreciate you having me. Valerie, do you want to start in? You just want me to jump in with the...
Sure. Yeah, I can start in. So I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the Health Sciences Center, since we sit right adjacent to the neighborhood. The Health Sciences Center as a campus, as part of the University of Oklahoma, includes 7 colleges, and they tend to be upper division colleges. So it's the sort of the 4th and 5th year of most of people's what we call undergraduate education, because we have a nursing college on the campus that is pretty large. It's got over 600 students as part of the nursing college. And then the other colleges, we have allied health, medicine, pharmacy, dentistry, public health, I mentioned nursing, a graduate college. And then in Tulsa, we have an extension of the College of Medicine on the Schusterman campus up there at Yale Avenue. It's the School of Community Medicine, where we really work to look more at a community-focused educational process for the medical students. The campus as a health sciences center has, and Paul can correct me on some of these numbers, but we have about 3,500 students, about 1,500 to 1,600 faculty, and then a lot of other employees sort of across the health center as a whole, because the Health Sciences Center includes not only the colleges that are part of the university, but also OU Health, which is our hospital, in a new relationship with us just as of this July. And the health center has a lot of other organizations that are part of it that Kathy and Katie and others can also speak to, but that's also all tended to be health focused or biomedical science focused. And then the Norman campus a few years ago brought to the Health Sciences Center the Price College of Business, and they're situated over in the University Research Park, which used to be Presbyterian, to be sure that we could engage some of the business activity associated with learning in these fields, as well as the business community of Oklahoma. So I think Price is the only college from the Norman campus that has a physical presence on the campus, but the School of Social Work also does a lot of work with us through one of the programs in my office, it's called Interdisciplinary Programs. It's where all of the health professions come together to look at joint shared learning opportunities for the students and or the faculty to engage in both outreach efforts, patient care, public health, a whole variety of things. And through that, we're expanding some of our activities around community engagement in lots of places across the metropolitan area and the state. So we're looking forward to some opportunities to work with the neighborhood in different ways than we might have in the past, because the university it's in its new era. We have a new president. We have some new opportunities moving forward. So I'll stop there and have Paul introduce you to some of the things about the physical and geography of the campus environment, and then we can come back and touch on some additional topics and or questions people have.
Thank you, Valerie. Vanessa, I'd like to go ahead and share a screen. I'll just talk from a map that I have from our campus, if that's okay with you.
Yes. Let me make sure you have that ability. Yes, you should be able to do that.
Okay. Seeing this map here?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Sorry, I don't have, I'm working off a touchpad, so it's hard to maneuver here.
That's okay.
So this is a, what is labeled OU Health Science Center, land ownership and building operations. And this is a map that I use often in my work to try to understand the composition of the campus because it's huge. There's maybe 400 acres in total here that we're dealing with. And the OU Health Science Center campus, as it's historically been referenced, really consists of numerous entities. So these colors, the yellow as an example, represents land ownership by OU, the University of Oklahoma. There are other entities that are integral in our campus activities, one of which is what we call our University Hospital and Trust partner, which has a state agency and trust component. And that's the orange components that you're going to see here more in the center of the campus. Blue are numerous other entities like Dean McGee, Blood Institute, formerly State Department of Health, DaVita Dialysis, OMRF up on the north. And we've got some, looks to be kind of pinkish here, which is Presbyterian Health Foundation. For example, Presbyterian Health Foundation owns the land underneath Embassy Suites, and they own several parcels out here like you guys are showing in your map. All right. The other big entity is OU Medicine, which is really only shown here, which is the primary hospital. Obviously, they also operate the Children's Hospital. The reason this is shown in orange is because of the complexity of the ownership on our campus. The University Hospital Authority Trust actually owns this land and these buildings, and they lease these properties to the hospital for operation. So it's hard to tell who owns what and who operates what, but this map represents it. And this is what I often use to give people kind of an overview of the lay of the land for our campus. Okay, so I'm going to just do a very brief virtual tour. This is a tour I do in person fairly often, but generally speaking, when you look at our campus and you look at the lay of the land, the way it's generally been perceived is we have our academic corridor over here on the east side, right hand of the map. And this is where we have our University Village apartments. We have a student field pavilion here, our College of Nursing, our student union, our College of Pharmacy, our College of Alabama. Okay, this is Stonewall here. You jump across Stonewall, we have our dental college, our library here. The only outlier from an academic standpoint, I will say, is all the way over here is our College of Public Health. This is the original College of Medicine, and our College of Health currently sits in this space here. Yeah. All right, so that's kind of our academic corridor. Our clinical corridor here closer to Phillips, historically, obviously consisted of the adult and children's hospitals here, the OU Physicians building here, and you'll see this building here labeled OU Health Partners. Historically, that was the Oklahoma City Clinic building, and we acquired that several years ago from the Oklahoma City Clinic, and are in the process of renovating this building. We will be putting a dental practice first in this space, and we're looking at other clinical activities to be placed in this building here. We have our Ham Diabetes Center here. We have a small health club here. We have our surgery center here. This surgery center is an OU Health Surgery Center. So it's part of the hospital operation, and I'll talk more about that in a second. And here we have our cancer center and our family medicine center. So that's kind of the clinical corridor, if you will. We kind of have a research core here, is the way it's generally been looked upon. We have our Stanton L. Young Biomedical Research Center here. We have what we call our Biomedical Sciences building. A lot of our College of Medicine faculty have research activities in this building here. This building here, this basic science education building, is actually the primary building where our College of Medicine students do their classroom learning. Okay, and then these orange buildings here around, I mentioned, was the University Hospital Authority and Trust owned. The purpose of the University Hospital Authority and Trust is to support our hospital operations. And so many of the activities in these buildings really do support all these hospital operations. So they're pretty integrally involved here. I'll come back to the hospital here in just a second. I want to jump across the street all the way over here to the Research Parkway. We acquired the Research Parkway 10 plus years ago. This is about a 25-acre parcel of land. There's 750,000 square feet of office and lab space in that complex. There's a small eating area here. It's a very nice research park. And you will hear, obviously, I think we're going to hear later from the Innovation District, you're going to hear about Innovation Hall. That is slated for development here across from our research park. So there is, I call this our research corridor, but there's also some outlying research that occurs here in our park. And then the Innovation District has plans for some business and research development in this area here. Okay. So the one I wanted to circle back with was OU Health. I know one of the interests of this group is, employment opportunities on the campus. And beginning July 1 of this past year, we formed OU Health with the help of many others. OU Health is now a separate entity. It's tied to the university, but it is separate from the university. I say that because I would say probably the plethora of business opportunities on the campus are going to be related to the hospital and hospital operations. And of course, we still have quite a few here with the university also. So there's kind of different employment centers for those largest entities that exist here on the campus. And I know we can talk more about that later. Last thing I want to reference here is, I know this map is very busy. I apologize for that, but I do want to point out a couple of lines. These red, blue, purple lines all relate to the Tif District, which I'll let Kathy and Katie talk more about that and how those dollars flow and where those dollars are directed. We have a parking jurisdiction on this campus. That's something that we manage. And we also maintain police jurisdiction on campus. Our police department, as an example, sits right here. This is 8th Street. Here is 6th Street. We have Phillips here and Stonewall here. So just for reference, our police department sits actually just north of the post office facility. And this police department serves this entire campus, and it's bordered by that black line. I can't speak a whole lot for some of the development down here. Obviously, the Embassy Suites sits here. The Kids Corral, which is where the pediatric cancer patient families stay for reduced or no charge. And as many of you know, they're in the process of building what they call an ACS, American Cancer Society Hope Lodge, which is for adult cancer patient lodging during treatment time. And the university does, as you mentioned and noted, we do own several properties here in this area. I will say the university's ownership interest does not extend past 6th, but between 8th and 6th, there is a fair bit of university ownership for future growth and development. Okay, Vanessa, I think that's the end of mine, or Valerie, I'm sorry, I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Yeah, so, and thank you, Paul. Vanessa and Deborah had a chance to visit with some of the faculty and leadership on campus not too long ago, and invited us to also think about, sort of the border between the campus, the university, and the community, and around what kinds of things we might have in common in terms of interests. As Paul just mentioned, with the sort of where the police department sits in that circle, I think for all of us, everyone in the neighborhood is interested in safety and in sort of accessibility of resources and services for the neighborhood writ large. And part of what I noticed on moving to Oklahoma was that where in New York, I could walk to the corner to get fresh vegetables, across the street and down one more block to get to the butcher shop to get fresh meat. Oklahoma, I had to get in my car to do every single thing. And it was like, in some ways, being back on our farm in Arkansas, and that you either grew it yourself or you had to get in your car to go there. So I think anything that brings more proximal to the communities, that safety and walkability and that ability to sort of share the kinds of resources that we tend to count on in our daily activities of life, you know, access to food, spaces to stretch our legs. These days, everyone is so cooped up around having COVID have to deal with. Just being able to get outside with other people is a lovely thing. So I'll stop there and open the floor for questions, or Vanessa, turn it back over to you to see how you'd like to go from here.
Yes, thank you all so much for the presentation and the map and the visual. That was super helpful. We have about 5 minutes after each presentation to open it up for discussion and questions. So if anybody has anything they'd like to ask or comment, this is a great opportunity to do so before we move on to the next presentation. All right. There was some mention about programs and employment opportunities. Paul, I think you mentioned that in your presentation briefly. Is there any other information you can share about how this community south of 8th could plug in specifically to some of those upcoming opportunities?
So Vanessa, I know on our previous call, we had representatives from OU Health on the call. I think it was Kaylee Hayward-Walsh and perhaps Jennifer Schultz. What I would encourage, and certainly Valerie and I can work with the human resource offices here for the Health Science Center campus, but I would also suggest you reach out to either Kelly or Jennifer to make a connection to their human resources, because with this transition July 1, the total employee count for OU Health, I would say, slightly exceeds right now OU Health Science Center. And I would say it's a dynamic employment base, as you might expect with healthcare. So I do know that in recent months, there's been great opportunity and great need for employment transition within OU Health. So I think Kelly and Jennifer will be great resources there. And Valerie, you and I can certainly reach out to our HR partners here and try to get you some links or contacts, Vanessa, that would be helpful for you.
Yes, that would be great. And we also plan on staying in touch. So thanks to Dr. Williams and Dr. Pam Allen and Paul, our new friend here. We will have ongoing meetings. Getting a lot of feedback, sorry if anybody else is getting that. But we will be having ongoing meetings with leadership and also the diversity task force alliance with the center to continue these discussions and share updates and continue to brainstorm how partnerships could align. So any other questions before we move on to the next presentation?
This is Gina Schopler. Maybe ask if you could, for the tactical committee's sake, elaborate on the development that is planned south of 8th Street. Since this focus is primarily about the land use and visioning for the area between 8th and 4th Street, we do see on your map the amount of ownership that's there. And so if you could elaborate, if you know of what type of development is planned, and even if there are any discussions about what that development might look like characteristically, or from a density perspective, you know, what's going there, anything that you can share with this group to help us understand what your plans are. And we appreciate the fact that you're here, because in the past, transparency has not been one of OU's strongest suits. And so I think here's an opportunity for us to be very transparent as you possibly, as long as you know, and to be transparent and to let this committee know exactly what is planned and what type of timeline they might be looking at.
So Vanessa, I'll be happy to respond to that if you'd like. Okay, just one moment. We're going to share my screen one more time.
Yes, please.
So we talked a little bit about this area here. You're specifically asking about south of 8th and the area that we show in yellow here. And as we know, these areas are already being developed. We do own that underlying land, but we lease that to both ACS and the Kids Corral, so that property has been developed. We own a few lots in here, a few lots in here, a few lots over here. No immediate plans for development on those lots at this point. We also own this lot here shown in red. And again, we use this as just a staging area for the campus. The only immediate plans that we do have a plan for an expansion of some of our infrastructure for our campus utilities, and it is actually planned right here on this yellow lot here. I mentioned to you, we have our campus police here, and we have the expansion plan here. Outside of that, we don't really have any, I would say, dense development planned south of 8th. Our development, or in the foreseeable future, this is an area of development with the build out here in OU Health Partners. There is some conversation about the Oklahoma State Department of Health and those properties. And I know our partners are in discussions with them about the potential of acquiring those properties, perhaps developing these properties here. That is on the foreseeable future, what we expect. Now, please keep in mind, when I say the foreseeable future, we've gone through immense change with our partnership with OU Health over this past year. We're in a very transitional period now. So broad, bold development plans from a campus standpoint are not something that are on the forefront of our immediate plans. So I think that's probably about as honest and transparent as I can be. And I know that we will see a lot of discussion about bold plans for development that I know Dr. Cox, when he was on last time, mentioned various public-private partnerships and developments. And so I do believe that Kathy and perhaps Katie will likely speak more to some of the bolder development plans in the foreseeable future.
So thank you for that. That's been a concern of JFK neighborhood for some time about your expansion. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We have a question or a comment. Ashley, I'm going to invite you to unmute. Do you want to share your comment that you shared in the chat?
Okay, sorry about that. Yes. So it's a comment and also like sort of an invitation. It says neighborhoods around OU HSC would love to keep an open line of communication around ways beautification along your boundaries can be prioritized so that both OU students and staff and residents can experience beautiful places to live, work, and play. And so we've just sort of noticed that along the outsides of the boundaries, of the campus where the neighborhoods are, there are opportunities for beautification, and we are also working on that in Northeast Oklahoma City neighborhoods to sort of prioritize placemaking and beautification projects, public art installations, etc. And I think that may pose a great opportunity for OU to sort of partner with those neighborhoods to install things that are beautiful so that people can experience their best quality of life in our communities. And so I would love for that line of communication to stay sort of open. And of course, Ms. Davis is on the line, who's the president of the Northeast Neighborhood Coalition, which is the best way to sort of reach out to neighbors. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Well, certainly, I think engagement in this group is a great way to communicate, and I appreciate your question. It's tough because there are so many different participants. We look at OU because we have such a large land presence there, but there are also other key participants. I know we work with the City of Oklahoma City and the Alliance for Economic Development, and on some of our boundaries, we do beautify some of the landscapes, some of the medians, for example, surrounding the campus, and we do work with the city on that. So it very much is a group effort that requires, like you say, transparency and communication, and I look forward to being involved with communication moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Ashley, and thank you, Paul. I think we have time for one more. Julie, I'm going to invite you to unmute and ask a question.
Thank you, Vanessa. As a residential developer in Northeast Oklahoma City, and particularly in the Culberson area, just east of Lottie, I have a question regarding parking. It was quite evident to us as we began developing in Northeast Oklahoma City that there is a extreme case of student parking in the residential streets. And that is a challenge not only for developers, but for the current residents in the area. So my question is, are you aware of that? And have you, hopefully you are, and what remedies do you have? Because it definitely is a negative impact on the neighborhood when there's double parking, and many times even the trash trucks cannot go down the street and pick up trash due to the double parking. So it is a major concern for the current residents as well as future residents in Northeast Oklahoma City.
So Vanessa and Julie, I'll try to take a shot at that. So I did mention in the presentation that the university does have some oversight of parking on the campus proper. I think, Julie, you're referring to some of the overflow into some of the residential areas, even outside of our jurisdiction. I'd be happy. I'm sorry I don't have a good answer for you off the top of my head. I do know that if people are not parking legally, that's certainly something we can take action with. We have a director of parking service on our campus. I'd be happy to bring back to this group and talk about the status of parking on the campus and maybe any overflow. And I'll also prompt him, Julie, to maybe to reach out to Oklahoma City and their parking enforcement and try to help explain to this group, what might be done to improve that situation.
Well, in our case, we actually did go through the process of applying parking restrictions. What I'd like to see is more proactive decision-making so that every street does not have to take it upon themselves to go through that process. So that's my appeal. What can OU do? And I understand it's not within your jurisdiction, but what can OU do to be proactive to eliminate this very negative impact on our existing communities?
So Julie, am I understanding you correctly? If we could work with the city and enhance enforcement in the area in order to minimize that impact, is that something you think would be effective for you?
Yes, it would.
I will reach out to our parking director. I'll ask to coordinate with Oklahoma City and see what we can do about enhancing enforcement around our district. And I'll be happy to report back to the group. I'm sorry I don't have an answer for you off the top of my head here, but let me have those conversations and I'll be happy to report back to you, Julie.
Okay, I do want to be clear that I feel enforcement is adequate. The challenge is that every street currently does not have parking restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
The burden would be on the residents to make that application. So, and many residents are not even aware that they can make that application. So it's not the enforcement. I'm talking about a more proactive approach to address. It is a problem, and just putting, our heads together to see what can be done, whether there is additional parking that can be provided, I don't know. But I'm trying to take the burden off of our residents and be more proactive with a partnership here.
All right. Thank you so much, Julie, for that question, and Paul for looking into that further. And again, we will be having ongoing conversations with OU and Dr. Williams and Paul, so we can continue this conversation and make sure that we bring and raise these questions and points of interest in our communication with OU. So in the interest of time, we're going to have to transition on, but thank you, and round of applause to our speakers. Thank you so much again for joining us and sharing some insight on OU Health Sciences Center. We appreciate your time. And feel free to stay on if you'd like to hear the rest of the presentations. You're more than welcome to do so. So moving on to our next presentation, we have Ms. Kathy O'Connor, who is back with us today, along with Leslie Batchelor with the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority, to share about the Tif District and for us to learn a little more about that. And I'm super excited because they have a tool, a video to share with us to kind of help us understand that process better. So turn it over to you ladies to take it away. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great, thanks so much, Vanessa. Kathy and I have a little presentation to give an overview of how TIF works, and then the particulars of the Innovation TIF District. I often think of TIF as the most commonly talked about but least understood public development tool that's out there. We're really quick to mention it. We see it in newspaper articles, and it really is a great tool. And we thought that starting with understanding kind of the mechanics of it, not in too technical a way, but really the principles that help understand like how it can help in the innovation district and all. So I think with that, maybe starting with this video that the Alliance has created for a simple overview of how TIF works.
Tax increment financing, or TIF, is an economic development tool used to encourage new construction and renovation and create jobs in an area that's underdeveloped or blighted. Developers usually have to foot the bill for infrastructure or improvements on the property they seek to develop, and that can be too expensive in some areas. TIF incentivizes developers to pursue developments that will positively impact the community, but otherwise wouldn't be feasible. TIF can only be used where a city or county can prove three things. The area is underdeveloped or blighted, such as low-income census tract or an area with aging infrastructure. The area wouldn't develop without assistance or public improvements. And using TIF is going to benefit the entire community and not just the developer. Let's say residents in Oklahoma City want a grocery store. A developer can purchase a blighted building that pays $5,000 a year in property taxes. The developer makes plans to redevelop it into a grocery store, as well as add sidewalks, water improvements, and other infrastructure, totaling about $10 million. As soon as the TIF district is approved, the baseline for the property taxes is set at that original amount of $5,000. The new construction and all the improvements increase the value of the property to $9 million, so the property taxes increase to $125,000 a year. The difference between the baseline property taxes of $5,000 a year and the $125,000 property taxes on the improved project is $120,000. That $120,000 is the tax increment, and it goes back into developing the property and improving the area. Over the life of the TIF, up to 25 years in Oklahoma City, the increment would generate about $3 million. Some of it could be used by the developer to offset the costs of construction or renovation, while the rest of it could be spent on sidewalks, public parking, water improvement, and other public improvements surrounding the project. Meanwhile, the original property tax revenue of $5,000 a year continues to be used for normal things like schools and libraries. There are long-lasting community benefits with TIF. After the completion of the grocery store project, the surrounding real estate may increase in value, generating additional property tax revenue for the community. Another positive byproduct for the community would be new sales tax revenue, as the businesses inside the TIF district sell more goods over time. Once the TIF has been paid in full, the community will then have the benefit of the higher property tax revenue of $125,000 a year versus $5,000 per year. So in the long term, schools and libraries receive more funding that wouldn't have been generated if the city had not set up the TIF and provided assistance to the developer.
So that gives a little bit of an overview. We've also got a PowerPoint. I'll do sort of the first half on the kind of legal background, and then I'll hand off to Kathy to explain some of the special features of the Innovation District TIF. So this is our cover of our project plan, which is the document that governs the TIF district and the project area. Next slide, please. Just to state what was in the video, but to think about it for a moment, like, so what is a TIF? It's a public tool, so it's something used by local governments that uses these newly generated tax revenues to generate development or redevelopment in eligible areas of a city, town, or county. So unlike typical like GO bonds that only fund like public infrastructure and are and where those revenues come from raising people's taxes, TIF comes from generating new investment and new development. So it's a tool really focused on that. Next slide, please. So when we think about the basic principles of how it works, I think there are 3 points to keep in mind, in addition to the point that it does not raise anyone's taxes. The first is that you only use TIF in an area that is not, thriving on its own, technically one that's, undeveloped, underdeveloped, or blighted. And the reason for that is that what you're seeking to do, the justification for using the tool, is that you need something to prime the pump, to leverage that development and give it a nudge. And it's a way of saying, if you invest and generate these new developments, it makes sense to capture that revenue in order to make this happen. So in an area that's not growing on its own, your property tax base tends to be flat or even declining. So that base assessed value is your starting point. When you generate the new developments, those developments pay those property taxes, and you know that you can capture those to reinvest them in the area. And the trade-off is that at the end of the life of the TIF district, when you've made those investments, not only do you have a stronger tax base, but if you've done your job right, you've generated development that makes the community stronger. And then when the TIF expires, you've got those increased values, a more thriving community to feed your schools, your health department, your libraries, your county, and so forth. But all of this only works, unlike GO bonds where you're raising people's taxes, there's only TIF revenue to spend if you actually generate the new private development. So because of that, TIF initially really needs to focus on what does it take to help get this vehicle rolling to get some private investment in the area. Next slide, please. So the legal authority for this comes from our state constitution. It was passed by state questions 641, I'm sorry, state question 707, and added a new section of the Oklahoma Constitution, which authorized the legislature to create a new law that gave cities, towns, and counties the ability to create TIFs, basically. And there are 3 major categories of what TIFs can spend money on. First, specific public investments, public infrastructure, public buildings. We're familiar with those sorts of things. Second, as assistance in development financing, which is when you use public financial assistance to help a private development. You can literally provide money to the private developer under a contract that ensures that you get the development you're trying to support, or by doing things for the project directly, such as providing utilities or site clearance, those sorts of things. But the third thing you can use it for is one that's used a little bit, but is usually not a focus of a project plan or such a major part as it is here in the Innovation District, which Kathy will say more about. And that is that you can use TIF revenue as a specific revenue source for other public entities in the area. So we'll talk more about that in the course of things. And so the city, towns, or counties, when they set up a TIF district, can direct that the increment is spent on any of these three things. It's called apportionment. Next slide, please. So I think it's worth understanding that the Innovation District TIF, which started as the Oklahoma Health Center TIF project plan, was actually the very first TIF in the state of Oklahoma. It was adopted soon after voters originally approved the first state question on this, and then the TIF was established. We had some litigation, and then a subsequent state question reaffirmed that TIF really did mean that you could pledge future years' revenues. It's been amended, the TIF project plan has been amended several times and is currently then focused on this idea of an innovation district, which really broadens the use of the TIF from supporting those major institutions and developments to really thinking more holistically about the different components that make this a strong area. Next slide, please. So some of the projects that we've focused on in the past, some of the successes are, what started as the GE Global Research Center is now OSU's Discovery Center. One of the earliest projects was the Presbyterian Health Foundation Research Park, including Cytovance biopharmaceutical manufacturing facility. The goal was to create jobs and provide some real energy there for the health center. More recently, of course, we've got the Paige Woodson project, which really, like these others, would not have been possible without the public financial support of the TIF. Next slide, please. So far, we've really focused on using TIF revenues for these, for assistance in development financing. Just to put a finer point on it, so using the constitutional authority, the legislature passed the Local Development Act, which spelled out how you establish a TIF, what it can be used for. So including not only public works, but the services, professional services that go into helping make these projects happen, and assistance in development financing, or that specific revenue source for the other public entities. Next slide, and I'll hand this over to Kathy. What we've got here is a map of the Innovation District TIF. The black line around the outside is the project area, which is the area where money can be spent. And the colored blocks are the individual TIF districts, including, you see the number 1. So it's literally the first TIF district for Oklahoma City. Kathy, you want to take over here?
Sure. Go to the next slide. So the Innovation District TIF is somewhat unique compared to the other TIF districts that exist in Oklahoma City. In the TIF project plan, it spells out what the budget for the Innovation District TIF can be used on. And so the categories are commercialization of research and technology, placemaking, implementation of the project plan, supporting development, and as a specific revenue source for public entities for enhanced education, skills training programs, internships, and entrepreneurial support. And that category E is what makes the Innovation District TIF unique. We do not have this feature in any of the other TIF districts in Oklahoma City. When we amended the plan to add this, it was contemplated that the TIF revenues could help establish new jobs, job training, to help grow the whole Innovation District ecosystem, but also as a recognition that schools in the area play an important part in that effort. So again, it's for public entities that are involved in the education programs, and is administered by an education committee that has been created by the Innovation District organization. Go to the next slide. This is a couple of the other, one of the other special features of the TIF district is that a substantial amount of the revenues that have been received to date by this TIF district are what is called a payment in lieu of taxes. So we have, as we all know, the area is widely made up of tax exempt entities, the university, nonprofits, all, none of those typically pay property taxes. So what has happened is that OU, OSU, and the nonprofits have agreed to make a payment in lieu of taxes to support TIF revenues or TIF dollars that were put into their project. So an example would be the research park. TIF revenues helped fund the parking garage in that area. And so the payment in lieu of taxes helps to retire the debt on that parking garage. So that's kind of a unique feature. And I guess we receive about $2 million a year from those payments in lieu of taxes. Go to the next slide. So this is kind of a breakdown of the different project costs, the assistance and development financing, public improvements, and funding for public entities, and how they might break out into projects. So, for example, with the assistance and development finance, we have supported Paige Woodson, as Leslie mentioned, Cytovance Pharmaceuticals, and now the new Convergence project, along with Innovation Hall. Public improvements can be things like streetscapes or placemaking projects, bike lanes, sidewalks, other kinds of infrastructure, even water and sewer improvements. And then funding for public entities is where we get into the education committee. So maybe a STEM program at Moon Middle School or a engineering club at Douglas High School. Those are just examples. Next slide. So the funding process is that potential projects are identified or recommended by the appropriate source. So typically what happens is a developer or even the Urban Renewal Authority or the Redevelopment Authority on its own can come up with ideas for projects. We make those recommendations to the Oklahoma City Redevelopment Authority, who administers this TIF district. And then we enter into a contract with that entity on how those funds will be provided to the project. Next slide. So this is the enhanced education priorities that are a part of the project plan. You can read through this, but I think I've kind of gone through some of this already, but it is designed to substantially increase the number of students, especially from the surrounding area, to become STEM professionals, and by ensuring their readiness for that kind of career. It goes on to say that any K-12 public school, including public charter schools, public technology centers, especially those serving neighborhoods in and around the Innovation District, may apply to participate. And then finally, the areas of primary participation are the nearby neighborhoods and contiguous areas northward between I-235 and I-35. Okay, go on. Or something I was going to say, but it went out of my mind. The Innovation District organization, as I said, has established a committee to govern an education committee, which is also one of the requirements in the TIF project plan. And they are working through the process of identifying how TIF revenues can be spent to support those education programs, and developing a process to issue a request for proposals and receive proposals for education services that support the neighboring areas. So, and that is all we have. Leslie, is there anything I skipped that you would like to add?
No, I guess just a couple of points of information. The overall plan goes for really more than 25 years because each individual TIF district can go up to 25 years. TIF 1 is about to expire. A couple of the TIF districts haven't yet been triggered because there's not been, major development proposed for them yet. So we don't want to have the clock run before we're ready to go on those. So although we've had it going for 25 years, it's been focused on those traditional, big projects. This most recent amendment really has helped it evolve. As Kathy mentioned, adding that education component. And I think with the focus on really creating an innovation district with all that's needed to connect the neighborhoods, support job creation. I think it will continue to evolve. The particular budget for the Education Committee is $18 million over the 25 years. So that'll be an ongoing program that can really help. And the assistance and development financing can be used to help implement the vision that comes out of this group for South of 8th, to align the public support, really for the type of development that we want to see in the area. One nice thing about the TIF is that, we see the area that the properties that Oklahoma City Urban Renewal owns. And as this committee has discussed, we have design review over those properties. The TIF gives a little added ability for influence, because if we enter into a TIF contract with a developer, we can negotiate the nature of that development. It's, like any other negotiation, you can agree upon the terms of it. So if we wanted to support particular types of housing, prioritize affordable housing, prioritize housing that meets certain design requirements, the TIF is one way that we can sort of influence things in a softer way.
Yeah, one thing, can we go back to the slide that has the map on it? Because I think it's important to show those areas where the clock hasn't started yet. So the 25-year clock has started on TIF districts 1, 7, and 11. And as we mentioned, TIF 1 expires next year. So TIF 7 is a little further out, and then TIF 11 is relatively new. But the areas that are identified as M and N, the clock hasn't started yet. And once we know that there is substantial development about to happen in that area, we will start that 25-year clock. So, and it just takes an action by the redevelopment authority and the city council, I think, to do that. So yeah, that was one of the things that I wanted to point out. Any questions? Do we want to go to questions or?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, the wonderful overview. We will open it up for about 5 minutes of questions. I see, Joachim, you've added a comment in here. Do you want to unmute and share?
Yeah, I really like the STEM educational focus, which I see it having a lot of value to the students and becoming sort of gainfully employed. But I think what is lacking when I look at data from Oklahoma, particularly Oklahoma City, there is this huge shortage of entrepreneurial African-American participation, right? So I think creating that entrepreneurial educational systems and mentorship would also help to imagine what it means to be a developer for the community members as they go on. So that's what I was just suggesting. Can we expand on that educational opportunities to go beyond STEM, creativity, as well as business acumen, as well as, I mean, I did not know about city planning until I graduated with a master's degree in fine art, right? Sort of those things would be beautiful for kids to have access to that kind of way of thinking.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other programs that are about to get launched. I mean, within the next couple of years, and one of those is Innovation Hall that will be in the Innovation District as a part of the convergence process. It will have entrepreneurial support services and programs that support and help develop those kinds of activities. And then the H.B. Foster Center, which is along 4th Street, is going to be redeveloped into the Northeast Center for Small and Minority Business Development and Entrepreneurship. So we've got a couple of really exciting new projects that are underway, and I could very easily see the TIF Education Committee getting proposals to help support activities in those 2 new facilities.
Got it. Thank you. So we're getting a couple of questions from online. The first one is, can TIF funds ever be used to help offset residential increases in property taxes, or is there ever consideration to freeze that for residents who might be negatively impacted by steeply increasing property taxes?
No, it can't be used to help an individual with their property taxes. It can't be used to help anybody with their property taxes. I think Oklahoma has some provisions in place that help offset the growth in property taxes. That sometimes you see people over 60, your property taxes get frozen. I need to check on mine this year, so. That there is only allowed a 3% increase each year in your assessed value. So there are mechanisms in place in state law that help manage that tax burden. But I noticed Mariana put a question in the chat about affordable housing, and displacement. And I do think that has been a priority of ours in the past. Obviously, we supported Page Woodson, which is predominantly affordable housing. And without the help of the tax increment revenues, that project would not have happened. Between renovating a historic building and building 137 units in the first phase that were, affordable to people who make 60% of the area median income or less was a pretty heavy lift. So certainly see that as a continuing priority for us.
Thank you. And another question, can we hear more about the upcoming proposal to promote education in STEM, especially in the neighboring communities? Who is working on that? How can community members be involved and add feedback?
So the Innovation District organization is working on that. And we are only tangentially involved. So I think Katie Bourne might be able to speak to that as a part of her presentation.
Yes, and we'll be having her up here next. Ooh, the chat is active on social media. I have one more. What are the implications of TIF 1 expiring next year, and what should the community know about that?
I'd be glad to try to take that. Really, there shouldn't be any direct impact on the surrounding community. I mean, it's one of those things that's really not visible. The part that will be different is that the increased values in that TIF district will go on the tax rolls. Those funds will flow again to the school district and the county and so forth. Which gets a lot of focus, both when we set up a TIF district and looking forward to the expiration. But I think one thing to keep in mind is how tiny a TIF district is relative to the geography of a county or a school district. It represents, not even, 1%. It's like a fraction of a percent of their overall tax base. And if we've executed the plan well, then in addition to the growth that's occurred just within the TIF, it's spawned growth outside that individual area, which I think we see in this area generally. I mean, one of the struggles that OKCPS has had over the past 3 decades is really a declining student body. And so part of what we need to do through our development efforts is, make this an attractive place to live and educate your kids and live proximate to good jobs. So it's sort of a 1-2 punch in terms of the strategy, both, trying to improve a narrow area, but thinking about how that affects the surrounding area as well. And I think we're frankly, we learn more about these efforts as we work on them. And so I think the broader focus that we have now is a better approach than we started with, but it was like prehistoric times. We were trying to figure out how to use this new tool and generate some development. So I think with the expiration of TIF 1, it really just signifies, I don't know, sort of a graduation of sorts, and hopefully a broader vision for the ways in which we can use TIF.
The other thing I would point out, the impact that it will have is that some of the payment in lieu of tax payments and those contracts associated with them will expire when TIF 1 expires. So we will no longer be generating that revenue anymore either. So the revenue piece of TIF 1 will end.
So it may be that the person is also wanting to understand if the expiration of TIF 1 has an impact or will have an impact on the surrounding community's taxes or property taxes directly. I think that may be one of the things they're also wanting to clarify.
No, it will not. TIF does not increase the tax rate, the assessment values, any of that. The calculations that are used by the county assessor's office. So there is no impact on taxes to properties in TIF 1 or around TIF 1.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. This is a great discussion. Thank you all for being active with the discussion. Joachim, do you want to just go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
I don't know how to ask this question, but just out of curiosity, on demographic data on those who have previously participated in TIF in Oklahoma City, and I know this is going to be complicated, but how do we sort of create an opportunity to include Black developers to participate in this type of opportunities?
Yeah, so you have to remember that TIF is allocated, especially in the Innovation District in the past, to some major institutions. So they are entities that serve a diverse population, like the OU Medical Center, the Research Park, Toby Keith's Kids Corral. All of those have received TIF allocations in the past. So I think you have to think of it more as looking at it from the populations that they serve or the opportunities that they create once the development is completed. We are, and for the rest of your question, we are working with Northeast Renaissance group and the Placekeepers program to encourage the creation of more minority developers and develop ways that we can work with them to help, get them more experience, more exposure, whatever it is that they need. And there's some people on this call that have been involved in that, I think. So, we are working on that. And I really think that that's one of the goals of this planning effort, is that we identify ways at the end of the day to get more people involved in the real estate development world, and whether that's as investors or developers or tenants, we need all of those things and for development to be successful. So, I mean, that's what I'm hoping. That's one of the goals I hope we get out of this whole process.
Kathy, to sort of piggyback on that, my question was going to be, how might you see TIF being used in development in the area, in the study area specifically, i.e. we're looking at lands that are owned by urban renewal and how they should be developed. I mean, that's ultimately what you're looking to gain out of this process. So in looking at that, how might TIF be used once that vision has been set forth and let's say RFPs begin to be developed and sent out? How might TIF be integral in getting a particular development going in the study area?
So, you know, it would be one of the methods that we spelled out during the presentation. More than likely, assistance in development finance is the most effective tool that helps spur development. So what it is designed to do is fund the gap between what the property can generate in rent and other kinds of income versus what it costs to build it. So in some areas, there's still a gap in Oklahoma City, and some of that's related maybe to infrastructure costs or things like that. The other thing that we can do is use TIF for infrastructure, and we have in the past on many of the projects that we've worked on before. So I think those are probably the two most impactful things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. And say, for instance, that would be, let's say, for instance, it is a development where the restriction on the land is that it's for affordable housing. Mm-hmm. That could sort of be a no-brainer, but what if it was not? Maybe it was a single family home or a duplex and or a quad, you know, let's just say no more than a quad on a particular parcel. The TIF would be limited, would it not, to certain aspects of that development?
Well, by using assistance in development finance, we have a great deal of latitude. I mean, it is a rebate or a reimbursement back to the developer. Mm-hmm. So to offset the developer's costs. I do want to say that we have not used tax increment financing to support single family residential development that I can think of. It is difficult, more difficult to do on a case by case basis with single family residential. That isn't to say that it couldn't be used to provide infrastructure to an area that needed it for single family development. But one of the ways that urban renewal subsidizes development on the property that we own is by selling our property for fair value, which is below fair market value. Right now, our single family lots are 60 cents a square foot. So it's about $4,500. It's very, very, very inexpensive compared to what lots are going for in that area, in the areas where we work right now. So I just wanted to say that it's challenging. One of the requirements that we have on TIF projects is that they agree to make a minimum tax payment to support the allocation of TIF revenues that they received. So that's harder to do with a individual homeowner than with let's say a fourplex that's owned by, you know, a commercial developer.
Thank you. I thought it was important that the committee understand some of those nuances and some of the limitations and why, as they begin to vision what needs to go on a particular parcel, or as they think through that once we get to that phase.
Yeah. No, great questions. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Kathy and Leslie, for joining us today and sharing just a wealth of information with us. And the video, is that going to be accessible online or something that we can share with the group?
Yeah, we can share it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great. So we'll make sure that's available to everyone. But thank you all again for joining us, and we thank you for your time. We are going to move into our final presentation for the day from Ms. Katie Bourne, President and CEO of the Innovation District. So Katie, thank you for joining us. Welcome. And I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm trying to share my screen and it says I cannot start screen share while another participant is sharing. So
that should be fixed now. Try
okay,
now.
good.
Let's
Okay.
see.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Much could be operator error on my end. So
No worries. Thank you.
all right, did that work? Do you see it now?
I see it. Yes.
Okay, terrific. Okay, well, thank you for having me today. Hello to everyone. As Vanessa said, my name is Katie Bourne, and I'm the President and CEO of the Oklahoma City Innovation District. And I'm excited to kind of walk you through a little bit about our organization today. Some of you have been very involved all along and could probably do this presentation right along with me, but I thought it would be fun to kind of get a high level understanding of our district and the things that we're working on. So I'll start out broadly with what an innovation district does, because there are less than 100 innovation districts across the country. We are well underway here in Oklahoma City and getting an idea about what an innovation district is intended to do is helpful. So it's kind of a combination of things, as you can see from this slide. It's really working on the sense of place and the sense of culture and the sense of economy all around STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, those economies in our city. So creating some kind of ecosystem for those STEM jobs and STEM industries in our city, and doing that in several ways. One of the things I'll say about our district is that we are a nonprofit. I filed our paperwork in 2019 to be a nonprofit. We are not part of the city or part of a university or part of the chamber. So we are just a nonprofit in Oklahoma City. We don't own any property or any buildings. So the things that we do are very program focused in order to activate that sense of place and the activity around STEM. They are driven by a lot of programmatic planning and activity. So one of the things we did right out of the gate, you'll remember, was to put forward an innovation district maps proposal that had 4 parts. One of them is Innovation Hall, and I'll go into that in just a few minutes, but also we proposed renovations to Booker T. Washington Park, some improvements to the 10th Street Bridge, and connectivity across the district, connecting the district and the neighborhoods and improvements there. And also renovating the Henrietta B. Foster building to be a center for Northeast small business development and entrepreneurship. So those were the things that got voted in, as you also are aware. So we're excited about those activities happening in the district. We are a part of those insofar as we are helping program them through different types of activities for people to join in. I'll go into that a little bit later as well. Focusing for a moment on Innovation Hall. It will be a building that is beginning to be built this year. It is over by the highway. You can see in these renderings that beacon of hope that you've seen for years there. It will be over by the highway in that area. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Innovation Hall and the plans for it. Again, We are the creator of activity and programs to create kind of a culture around STEM. And so we applied to be operator of this building. We responded to the city's RFP to be operator, and we're hopeful that we will be operator. So we will activate the place with all kinds of programming, networking opportunities, community involvement, workforce training, STEM camps for kids, and all kinds of activities in the STEM world. One of the things we did in preparing to our application to be operator was meet with many members of the Northeast Oklahoma City community and business owners as well, in order to get feedback and find potential partnerships for activating the space. So we're very excited about all of those meetings and the feedback that we got. One thing I find helpful is to know some of the assets that are existing in the district, because if you understand some of the interesting, really successful STEM industry participants that we have in the district, you can see that these kinds of organizations help us be a competitive city in the country for growing our economy here around life sciences and biotech, for example. You can see why we are really positioned to be a competitive city when you see this list of organizations in the Innovation District, and why this district is unique in the state. I told you we got up and running in 2019. One of the things we're proud of that we've accomplished in a short amount of time was to really identify a brand for us and to really get the participation of the people of Oklahoma City, in Northeast Oklahoma City and across the city, and the companies that are here, all around this idea that we collectively can create an ecosystem here that advances our workforce opportunities as jobs increase as well, because the work we're doing is attracting business and investment in our city, which creates job growth, and we are in the middle of all of that. So we were designated Outstanding Innovation District of 2021, so we were proud for that. One of the other things that we're working on is to bring federal dollars to Oklahoma City. I listed out the various organizations that make us so special, and putting together a federal grant request around that life sciences and biotech cluster, so that we can even more completely compete across the country in that industry. So one other piece of good news is that we were determined to be a finalist in this grant competition. You can see the other finalists here. We will find out, we have another filing deadline in March, and we will find out in the fall whether we ended up as one of the 20 to 30 winners of this federal grant in the country. Some of the ways that we try to do outreach and try to create this sense of place is through marketing and storytelling. You can follow us across social media. We are on all social media platforms, and we regularly post about STEM activities in our city and state, entrepreneurs in our city and state, community activity in our city. So it's a really great way to follow the things going on around STEM in Oklahoma City. Another way that we try to share about what's going on in this industry is through a monthly newsletter. You can also sign up for that. It's called The Ecosystem. And then we also have a monthly in-depth article called In Focus that we do monthly as well. And we highlight, just like with our social media activity in the e-newsletter and the In Focus article, we highlight things people are doing in Northeast Oklahoma City, things that are happening at universities and industries, things entrepreneurs are doing. So we really try to create that culture around STEM in these ways. One of the things that has a great deal of information is our website. So I encourage everyone to go there. It's also where you can sign up to receive those newsletters and also follow all of the activities that we have. We put on a lot of programming during a year, close to 50 events so far this last year. Even in a pandemic, we ended up putting some on virtually. Some are just networking events, but many are subject matter driven. We had a panel on drone technology. We're having a panel coming up on innovations in radar technology. So we really kind of dig into some of the subjects, the STEM subjects that point to some of our expertise here in the city and some of the assets that we have. So we have really interesting programming to participate in. And when we win, cross our fingers that we are operator of Innovation Hall, we plan to incorporate a whole other level of programming in the Innovation Hall building that, like I said, we met with many organizations across Northeast Oklahoma City to kind of add to our partnerships for activating the space in STEM and workforce and K through 12 education. So we're very excited about all the things that we'll be able to do when we are operator. I was talking about some of the events that we have. We have a couple of monthly events. This is a picture of one of them. Many of you have probably attended our monthly lunch. We have it in the same place, Style Circle, every month. And it is a very well attended event, and we buy you lunch. We also have a monthly happy hour that we move around the district, where we try to highlight bars and restaurants, and we bring people together in an evening setting. Not everyone can come during the day. So we like to have that event as well. It's also very popular. Just to give you an idea of the volume and the type and the subject matter of our programming, where we try to make an impact. We put headings together so we can make sure that we touch on all of the subject matters that we really care about, and they're a part of our mission. And so we put those on this slide. And you can see some of the branding for some of our events across the bottom. We partner heavily with other organizations to put on our events because we have expertise of all kinds in the city. So we kind of curate those and convene people. Here are some of the photos from on the left, that lunchtime event that I mentioned. The one in the middle is our happy hour that we move around the district. And then on the right, we work with schools and community organizations to do STEM activities as well. So we put that kind of programming on as well. And we've had nearly 5,000 people at our events recently. One of the other ways it's kind of interesting that we try to bring people together is called the Nucleus. And it's kind of it's what I would call a virtual city. So all the things I've described that we do to try to connect people, and maybe they have a common, maybe they're both engineers or maybe they're both entrepreneurs. We try to do it in a virtual setting too, so people can continue conversations about topics and meet each other and find resources in our ecosystem. Maybe they need funding, maybe they need information about business, kind of a business education class, a lot of resources. And we try to do this in a virtual setting so people can continue those conversations by joining the Nucleus, by joining this virtual city, and then continue to have interactions and make connections with people here as well. Just one more way to convene people and to create an ecosystem around STEM. As I mentioned, you can sign up to attend events on our website, which is a great way to be involved. And we've had really positive feedback about our events. And so people have made a lot of really important connections of all types. So we're really proud of that. We also have an event calendar on our website that tries to track events throughout the district and also kind of a broader look at other events happening maybe across town, but still in that same ecosystem. We also try to celebrate a lot of things happening in Northeast Oklahoma City too. Is one of the things I'll ask for is that if anyone has events happening, that you send them to us so we can put them on the district calendar so everyone can see. One of the things that is central to our mission is community engagement. So as jobs come, because of the work of the Innovation District and other organizations, as our STEM industry grows here and we become more and more competitive nationally and globally, the great success that we have means a lot more jobs and a lot more investment in the city, and the benefit of that across all of Northeast Oklahoma City is central to our mission. And so we really work hard to prepare all of the programming we can to have K through 12 interested in STEM and on a path for a STEM career or a STEM job. Same with adult learners and workforce training for people who want to upskill or reskill or change jobs, so that the great economic benefit from this activity is experienced by all. And I know Kathy talked quite a bit about the Tiff, which is a great setup for part of what we do. We pulled together the Tiff Education Committee as required by the Tiff, which is a great, a really brilliant and unique focus of a Tiff that does not exist in other places. So we're extremely lucky to have this. It will yield about $18 million over the next 25 years, as I'm sure Kathy discussed. But that is focused specifically on STEM education and workforce development in Northeast Oklahoma City, which is absolutely brilliant and terribly exciting. And this committee is doing really great work. They have toured Northeast Oklahoma, which is called a place called Mid-America Industrial Park. They've gone to OCCC, Metro Tech, Rose State. They're really doing a lot of great work to prepare for recommendations on STEM programming in Northeast Oklahoma City. So that is a really great aspect of our TIF that, again, is really unique to us, which is very exciting. The other things that the Innovation District does programmatically to connect Northeast Oklahoma City to the STEM activity that's happening in the district. We use our social media platforms and our e-newsletter and our in-depth articles to focus on Northeast Oklahoma City organizations and businesses. We put together programming that supports Northeast Oklahoma City businesses. We connect neighborhood organizations and business organizations to all of our network. We support Northeast Oklahoma City schools through volunteerism and through supporting teachers and faculty. I'm honored to say that I'm on the board of Northeast Oklahoma City Renaissance and partner with the board itself and many individual members on all of the activities that everyone has going on. We are supporters of the One OKC Festival and really assisted last year in helping put on that day. We have incorporated into our programming partnership with Restore OKC, where we call on our entire STEM network to volunteer 4 times a year, and also volunteer within Northeast Oklahoma City schools. We are putting together internship programs, STEM internship programs for Northeast Oklahoma City schools, and some math games programming and different things like that that are really exciting and really pair well with our attempts to take advantage for our city of the assets that we have to be competitive in this global economy. So that's a little bit about our nonprofit. I don't know if anyone has any questions. That was kind of a lot of information. in a short amount of time, and I realize that, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Katie. That was such great information and a thorough overview of the Innovation District. I know I've learned a couple of things, so I'm excited to hear if our audience has any questions or feedback for Katie to share. A lot of partnerships and collaboration. It's awesome to see and hear from you, Katie.
Yeah, that's one of the things, Vanessa, I know I've talked to you about it a lot. And that is, if we were just to sit and imagine all of the things, all of the ways to program and all of the subjects and all of the ideas just ourselves, you know, that would really be pretty boring, I would imagine. We like to really partner across the city with people who do fascinating, creative, exciting things in our city. And so this place will be programmed by that entire network, which to me makes it so much more robust and interesting and inclusive. And it is really a thrilling time.
Yes. Ashley, I see your comment. Thanks, Katie. My 3-year-old is an engineer, so I can't wait for the children's programs to roll out. So
we're ready. We're ready.
Talented, yes. Business owner, entrepreneur, engineer, yes. Living his best life. Yes. All right.
Interesting to know if anyone, did Katie clarify the role of the Innovation District, what her role is? Was anyone under the impression that it was different? Be interesting. I know for me, I met Katie a few months ago, and I'm going to say it has been a pleasant surprise. I was totally I don't want to say misled. I just had totally different assumptions about what her role was, what the Innovation District was all about. And so in our first meeting, I actually came to the meeting a little, put off, right? With a little bit of hesitancy, a little bit of anger, a little bit of annoyance. And it has been, we've been meeting on a regular basis ever since then. And it has just really been great to get to know Katie and get to know what's going on over there. So I'm just interested in finding out if there are other people who had some misconceptions or if her presentation clarified anything for you. Christina has a question.
Yeah, I see. I'm trying to pull up. It says, it's going to, I can pull up slide 3 again. I'll do that in just a second. And then Christina also, it says, how can people get involved with the education committee? That's a great question. The committee itself is, the chair is Gary Woods, and he is doing such an incredible job leading the committee. And part of the committee's intent is to get feedback and really gather information from across Northeast Oklahoma City, from educators, and teachers and faculty and families and business leaders to really do a full assessment of what would be a great STEM investment. And so my understanding, Christina, is that part of what Gary intends to do is to have people maybe be on subcommittees and participate by helping gather data and give input. And so I think that there will be lots of opportunities for people to get involved and really help shape the committee's assessment and recommendations around STEM investment.
Katie, can you speak a little bit to, I would imagine that this group and or at least some of the members of this committee are interested, very interested in the Henrietta B. Foster Center. And not just the renovation of it, but you know, the programming, and who has been consulted around that programming. Where did those ideas come from? Was there interaction with the community to come up with this idea? And if not, if so, that's great. If not, are there any future plans to sort of remedy that and bring community, specifically Harrison Walnut and JFK, and certainly others that are not living in the community anymore, but have a vested interest in what happens here? Are there any things in the future to remedy that and bring them more inclusive in what happens in the Henrietta B. Foster Center?
Yeah, so Katie, do you want me to take that one?
Sure. I mean, I can, and I know that you probably have information to add. You want to take a stab at it first, or?
Sure. So, Gina, on the HB Foster Center, the city recently issued a request for proposals for the operator, and those are not due until March. So, I think that the various entities who might respond are all going to have a different way of trying to gather information to put in their response. And really, until an operator is selected, some of that community engagement stuff probably won't start in earnest until after that happens.
And the other thing I say is, as far as the origin of the idea for this, I think it was in conversation with community leaders in Northeast Oklahoma City, but also there are some really great examples. And we do this a lot. Other cities who do cool things and have real great successes. I know we will, for the Innovation District, we'll see who does some really good programming and kind of emulate that. There were some really great examples, I think, that Kathy and others had seen in some other cities that kind of sparked the idea for this, if that gives also a little bit of background.
I have a comment.
Yes.
Sure, Vera.
This is Vera Ford, and I really appreciate that question, that last question that was just proposed. We are located in the Henrietta B. Foster Center. We've been there since 1990. We are Harambee, Inc., and there's a lot of history behind Harambee, and I am the executive director of Linda Hand Parent-Child Center for the Prevention of Child Abuse, and we are in the Henrietta B. Foster Center. We have not been informed of anything. We have not been included in anything. No one has communicated anything to any of us that's in there. Anything that we have heard about what's been going on or will be going on with the Foster Center has been secondhand information, but no one has taken the initiative to contact us about anything or to make us inclusive on anything. And this has not set well with our neighborhood association or with the residents in the community, because many of those residents that are in the community were instrumental in raising the funds to innovate the Henrietta B. Foster Center. And they felt like they have just been kicked to the curb. And as they say, here we go again, another urban renewal project coming in, Beauregarding, taking over without including anyone in the community. And so that's the attitude that is in the air right now.
So the HB Foster Center project is a MAPS 4 project that the city is sponsoring. So I will get back with the city and let them know that they need to communicate with the tenants in the HB Foster Center. I did not know that that had not happened.
And we are aware that that is a MAPS 4, and we were not even consulted that you would be presenting a proposal to MAPS 4. We were not even consulted on that. We heard about it when someone contacted us and said, "Oh, did you know there's the presentation being made before the city council on MAPS, blah, 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 about the Foster Center." And so that's how we found out about it, even back then, before MAPS even came about, that we were not consulted, we were not informed. We should have been given, we felt like we should have been given the courtesy, if nothing else, of knowing what was going to be proposed.
I will talk to the city about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vera, for your question. And yes, we'll make sure to follow up and get some answers to that. Joachim, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, yes. Sorry, I think it was slide number 2. If you could look at that again.
Yes.
Please.
Tell
I
me,
absolutely loved it.
let me make sure I get the correct one here. This one right here?
Mm-hmm. Yes, the 3 entities, right? Culture,
Yes.
economy, and let's see, what was the other one? Place.
Mhm.
I was just curious. I mean, I love this. This is beautiful. This is good visualization. But I was wondering how you would go about curating it, and whose voices are the ones to shape culture, particularly really interested in the context of culture. I mean, obviously place and economy sort of is given. I was really curious about that and how you would assume or plan on activating and curating that.
Well, as I mentioned, our origin is an effort to create a STEM culture for our city, because if you go to other cities, this knowledge-based economy, this STEM economy is the competitive economy globally going forward. So our oil and gas days being so committed to one industry, diversifying and being competitive in the STEM economy is key for our city. And so if you go to other cities, there is an entire kind of culture or ecosystem around STEM. So all of the people who are, work in science, technology, engineering, or math or related industries have a connection across the city. There's programming, there's workforce training, there's all kinds of things, exchange of ideas, efforts to encourage collaboration and innovation that starts new companies. So that entire ecosystem is the culture that was missing in our city around STEM. And so I mentioned earlier the different ways that we do this, right? That's why I started with this slide and then said all of the ways, because there's not one single lever to pull to create the atmosphere in our city around STEM. And so we do this many ways. I also mentioned by partnering with a lot of the activities in Northeast Oklahoma City and across the city, because all of everyone's input and everyone's participation is what creates that great result. So we partner a lot in informal and formal ways. We put together programming that brings people together and convenes people around ideas. We try to create a place people can come to get resources if they're an entrepreneur, for example, or if they want to have a STEM career. We have a place for them so that they can learn more and be connected and have services. We try to create a place that collects all the activity in our newsletter, for example. It's a great example of all the things happening in STEM And so people have a place to go to find out that information. Even nationally, they get to look at our presentations that I do nationally. They get to look at our website to find out exactly what Oklahoma City has to offer and why they might want to start their business here or expand their industry, their enterprise level business here. So really, scrolling through the whole deck of slides kind of informs all the different ways that we try to incorporate to get the best result possible and the richest definition of culture possible in STEM.
Katie, I know we don't have a lot of time, but can I ask a question about the job creation?
Yes.
How can this community and the Northeast Oklahoma City community benefit from the job creation in the Innovation District?
Well, a few ways, and I'll answer your question, and there was one in the chat about bringing back health sciences and engineering related to Northeast High School. So all of that is kind of related in that the deliberate and intentional planning through the Tif committee is one example of efforts to invest in STEM education and STEM workforce training in Northeast Oklahoma City, so that starting with the little ones all the way up, that we have a lot of opportunity for people to enter into STEM jobs or STEM careers or change their career into the jobs that will be coming, that are existing now and that are only growing. And so it's deliberate efforts like that. We also, and again, it really is a multifaceted effort because we do small things, small ways too. We introduced Ms. Davis and the Neighborhood Coalition got introduced to Metro Tech and Oklahoma Blood Institute at one of our events, and they started talking about ways to connect neighborhoods to job training and job opportunities in the district, like with OBI, for example. And so, and we do that over and over again in those ways. And then we also are planning on having, I mentioned internships, and they are in the health sciences industry, but having internships across Northeast Oklahoma City schools where that's just one more pipeline and one more program in Northeast Oklahoma City around STEM, and then also workforce development in the district for life sciences jobs for workforce training. So we have many different big and small programs that we have instituted and are going to be instituting in the future that are trying to speak to that very thing. Yes. A question that says about promoting STEM education programs.
Yes, it's Julie's question. I think she's unmuting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you're good, Katie. Hi, this is Julie Coffey.
Hi.
Just a pleasure to have you today. But I wanted to learn more about this upcoming STEM proposal. And I think that's one in the same, possibly with what Gary Woods is chairing on. I just wanted to get clarification there. But my primary question is just how can community members and stakeholders of in Northeast Oklahoma City get involved in that process and learn more about where that proposal is now. Not sure if it's complete, but if you could just give us a little more there on the STEM proposal.
Absolutely. And it's good to see you, by the way.
Thanks to see you as well.
So one of the things I will actually talk with Gary about is we have done a lot of talking about how to ultimately spread awareness and get buy-in and excitement around STEM and whatever the STEM committee, Education Committee proposes and what is coming. So we've talked a lot about on that end, getting the word spread and people understanding and excited and invested. And but what I haven't talked to him about actually is bringing people along other than getting input. We've talked about that during the process. But as far as sharing, we haven't spent as much time. I haven't heard from him on his thinking for bringing people along, just understanding the process. So I will bring that back to him. Maybe he has some ideas about that, but I know that they are gathering information and feedback across the community as part of their work to decide what they would recommend for STEM education and workforce education.
So this is Jennifer, and I'm on the TIF Education Committee. We're a relatively new committee. I don't think we've been meeting a year. We've been meeting months. So there's still a lot of things to work out. So our goal is definitely to have a communication piece so that we're keeping everybody informed. But we, like I said, we're relatively new. And so we're working through all of that. But the goal is definitely to make sure everybody is informed.
Yes, that we have talked about how if you're opening a business, for example, and nobody knows anything about your business and you just open your doors and hope people come, you're not going to have a whole lot of success. And so Ms. Davis is right. The communication piece is so important. So when everyone is, anxiously anticipating the opening of the doors and, and is extremely excited and that it goes really well and we have a lot of successful participation.
Well, thank you. And I, as a STEM professional myself, I know there are many STEM assets right in Northeast Oklahoma City community and great stakeholders as well. So I just want to invite you all to not only have the communication of what you're doing, but know that you got some assets in this community that I know would be more than pleased to lend, expertise as well as experience to help with this effort. Because I know it's much needed and will be a valuable asset to all of Oklahoma City.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We love the interest and support, and yeah, you are an exact example of a STEM leader. So yeah, it's great to hear from you.
All right. I see there are a lot of STEM cultural assets found in Black communities in Oklahoma. Thanks, Julie. I was just typing that. Yeah. So Katie, thank you so much for your presentation and a thorough overview of what the Innovation District is doing and plans to continue this collaboration, partnership, and connection to the community. It was great to hear from you.
Thank you
for joining
very much
us.
for having me.
Yes. All right, y'all. So just to close us out, we just kind of wanted to briefly go over some next steps here. So we will have one more session in this education reflection phase of the project. It will be over design and aesthetics. So we'll see you all back on, what date is that? That will be the 19th for that session. And yes, please, thank you all. There's people who have sent their bio and their headshot just since we've been on the call. Thank you all so much. So please, 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 if you haven't already, send that over so we have it on you, and the form as well. If you can scan that in and sign it and scan it in. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope that we can move towards being back in person as we can. So we'll be watching everything and making plans to see when we can do that again and do it safely. I will say Metro Tech, the new space that we're in, many of you were at the first session but haven't been able to be in person since then. We have a really large classroom that's really great for social distancing, and we hope to plan to convene in person because it's just always better in person. But thank you all again for joining us today. We'll see you next time. And as always, if you have any questions, need feedback, have anything you want to raise, please you don't have to wait until the next session to do that. You have our phone number, you have our email. We are always here to listen and include your ideas. So thank you all. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back on the 19th.